Hey guys, it's Kira and welcome back to another episode of Vlogmas. I have to admit, the month is going so quickly that I am now starting to lose track of days, but today is Friday the 9th of December and I think that we are now onto Vlogmas episode 6, but whichever Vlogmas episode this is, welcome. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are, and I'd love to know what sort of weather you guys are having this December, because just before Vlogmas we were having an unseasonably warm November. It was so mild. I was like, is winter actually even here? Is it coming? What's going on? Global warming is getting a little bit too real. But then December arrived and all of a sudden it just changed like that, and it is now freezing cold outside. So this morning is one of my favourite kinds of winter days to look at because it is just so beautiful. The sky is completely clear and inside I'm nice and toasty, but then outside I can just see frost on every single surface. Jay had to scrape the car when he left for work this morning and I felt very smug about staying inside in the nice warm house while he had to set off and go and do days of work outside. But it looks so beautiful and just so like quintessentially wintry outside, and I absolutely love it. But we haven't had any snow yet. I wasn't thinking that we were going to have any because of how like unseasonably mild November was. I thought snow was just completely out of the question, but the colder it's gotten throughout the month, and it is getting colder and colder with each day, the more I'm starting to think that snow might be just around the corner. So I'm going to have to check the weather app because, I mean, you can never trust the weather app. I kind of think you can only trust what you can see outside because it changes so much, but I also love to look and see. So it currently says today is going to be sunny, but then Saturday has a little snowflake, so I guess I'll have to wait and see whether that actually happens, but I'm excited for it to snow. I have to go to Newcastle this weekend to visit my friend. We're doing a Christmassy day out together and that is on Saturday, so I'm kind of hoping no snow until then so that my travel doesn't get disrupted, but then that is the last, like, I guess, long distance travelling that I'm doing across the country between now and Christmas. I don't have any more work trips, I don't have any more like engagements booked outside of York or Leeds, so I don't have to go too far. So basically after Saturday, bring on the snow, but until then I'm kind of hoping it just stays cold but not snowy. But anyway, I'd love to know what your weather is going to be like, or like what weather you've been having. Do you have snow? How cold is it? Here it's just like sitting around about 0 Celsius obviously, and it is very cold, but I'm kind of loving it now that I'm feeling warmer inside the house. So welcome to another episode of Vlogmas. As per usual, let's kick it off with a cup of tea. After yesterday's tea, if anyone saw Vlogmas yesterday, you'll know that I was very disappointed with a herbal tea blend. So let's hope that number 9 brings more joy than yesterday's tea did. There we go. Irish cream. I had this one last year and it was delicious. So this one is a rooibos blend with cocoa shells, coffee beans, roasted dandelion root and natural flavouring. So it basically is like a tea coffee blend, which I love because I am neither a tea or a coffee person. I absolutely love both. I probably drink more tea because I feel like it's maybe a little bit less caffeinated and like maybe considered a tiny bit healthier to drink tea more than coffee, but I'd still drink quite a lot of coffee to be honest. And outside of Vlogmas I usually start the day with a cup of coffee and then move on to tea later on in the morning. So this is a blend that I loved last year and I think will love again this year because I just think it's such a nice fun blend, and also Irish cream, Bailey's is very like Christmassy, so I feel like this is one that I'm very happy with, and it has officially redeemed itself after yesterday's crushing disappointment. So without further ado, let's make up a cup of Irish cream tea. Wow, that does smell just like a creamy Bailey's, but obviously minus the like alcohol-y smell. But I do think while I love tea, I absolutely love tea. Obviously, that is a well-known fact among this community. However, I do think that the smell of coffee is unparalleled. Like, I would probably say, what do I drink more of? Probably tea, because it's so easy to just like pop the kettle on, have a cup of tea. And I feel like I have coffee at more like specific times of day, either when I'm going out and I'm getting a coffee like at a cafe, or first thing in the morning I will have a coffee usually. But tea is the thing that I would have more, but I never like smell a cup of tea except for if it's like, you know, a specific blend, like one of these flavoured teas. If I'm just making a standard cup of tea, I never like smell it and go, ah, tea. But I would do that with coffee, because I think coffee just has such an exceptional smell. I just think coffee is an unbeatable smell. I actually once had a candle that was coffee scented, because I think the smell of like a coffee house is just exceptional. But this tea, I think, brings the best of both out there. You have like a sweetness and a creaminess and the aniseedy sort of smell of the rooibos tea, and then you also have like the depth and richness of coffee, and I think that smells exceptional. I don't know if I've said exceptional enough, but it smells exceptional. So I'm gonna let that blend, let the flavours really ruminate, and while I do, I have a bit of a, well, it's not really a confession, but it's kind of a confession. So as we know, I'm currently in the midst of trying to hit my Goodreads goal challenge, which is to read 75 books this year. And that is the goal that I've had for the last 3 years in a row. And I don't want to make this year to be the year that I ruin that streak. However, it's not looking very promising, I'm not going to lie, guys, because it is now, as I mentioned, the 9th of December. And I am currently 41 books in. So I've read 41 books. Don't know if you can see that, just so that we are being very transparent with each other. I've read 41 books and I need to read, how many is like this? Like 34 books left to read. So that's a lot of books, and I'm now getting closer and closer, so I'm gonna have 21 days left as of today, basically. So it's going to be tight, and with that said, this is where the confession comes in. So the confession isn't that I'm doing a terrible job. I feel like we all knew that. I didn't need to confess it. The confession is that the book that I have been reading, which is Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, is almost as crushing of a disappointment as yesterday's tea flavour, and that is saying something, because I went into this really hoping to find a new classics author that I could love and read like a full collection of, because I did that last year with Jane Austen and I loved it. Jane Austen is an icon, a legend, an absolute superstar, and I think she is wonderful. So I really enjoyed reading all of her books and finding my favourite, which was of course Emma, but all of the books were really enjoyable. And so I was hoping, because Thomas Hardy also has quite a lot of books, to find a similar sort of like kinship with his writing style, but alas, that just doesn't seem to be the case. His writing is so morbid and dark and glum and melancholic, and it is just not bringing the festive spirit to me. So I don't want to say that I'm giving up on Tess of the D'Urbervilles, but I am taking a short break, and that break is going to bring an unparalleled sense of joy and light into my life, because I have decided to put the spinning wheel of books to one side for this particular occasion and pick up a book that I just desperately want to reread and then read, and that will become clear in just a second. So yesterday I finished watching season 3 of Anne with an E on Netflix, which is the final season of that show, devastatingly so, because it's so good. Anne with an E made me cry with a C, because it was just so incredible. It made me feel so happy. You've taken on like the full spectrum of emotions by that show, but it is just so uplifting and joyful and heartwarming, and I think it is genuinely one of my favourite shows of all time. So last year, when I first started watching Anne with an E, I read Anne of Green Gables for the very first time. It is my mum's favourite book, or certainly was her favourite book for a really long time, and her favourite like childhood book, and I had never read it, so I really enjoyed reading it for the first time, and it became abundantly clear why my mum loved this story so much, because it is just such a lovely story and it brings nature to life so incredibly vividly. I just think it is such a wonderful story, and Anne is just such a great character. So I read Anne of Green Gables, which is obviously the first book in the series, and this book actually encompasses Anne of Green Gables and then the second book in the series, Anne of Avonlea, and I actually never read that second book. So what I'm going to do is, in the spirit of celebrating Anne with an E and Anne of Green Gables and this incredible character and story, I'm going to reread Anne of Green Gables because I just think I'm going to love it so much, and Anne is just such a wonderful character who brings so much joy that it feels like, although the book itself isn't necessarily festive, the spirit of Anne definitely matches the spirit of the Christmas season. So that's kind of the justification I'm giving. And then once I finish Anne of Green Gables, I'm also going to read Anne of Avonlea. So that means I can tick off 2 books from my list, 2 for the price of 1, which I think is wonderful and definitely pushes me down this path, because I know I can read this not only quite quickly but also have a great time, which I think also makes the reading experience go faster, whereas I feel like I can just see the days ticking away before my eyes as I slowly try to meander through Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So will I or will I finish Tess? We'll have to wait and see, but what I will be doing is reading Anne of Green Gables, and I, for one, I'm not sorry about it, because I think this is going to be such a lovely reading experience. So there we go. I've made my confession. I'm putting the spinning wheel of books to one side, not for the entirety of December. Don't worry, it will be back because it is so much fun, but I needed to take matters and fate into my own hands to make sure that I could read Anne of Green Gables before December is out. So there we have it. And now I've confessed my sins, it is time for a cup of Irish cream tea. So without further ado, cheers to you. It's so weird because it is literally like I don't know, like, what flavour is Irish cream? Like, it's vanilla-y, but it's got like a little bit more something to it. I don't really know how to describe it, but that flavour just comes through and is very recognisable as like an Irish cream flavour. And then we have like the sweet, almost nutty notes from the rooibos tea, and then like the richness and the depth of the chocolate and the coffee. Exceptional is all I can say on this one. So with that said, it is Friday morning. I'm gonna get to work for the day, and maybe I'll find some time to do some reading on my lunch break, because I do not want to leave Anne. Like, I felt like I wasn't ready to part ways with Anne and all of the other characters at the end of watching Anne with an E, so this seems like a good way to keep that spark alive and keep that connection with the characters going for a little bit longer. I'm heading into my afternoon of work feeling very, very nostalgic, because I started my reread of Anne of Green Gables on my lunch break, and I just adore this book, but it's bringing up all of the same emotions that I felt the first time around reading it. And I read this book at the kind of turn of summer to autumn last year, and I kind of remember just feeling so completely like enthralled by this story and by Anne as a character, and I'm just feeling that all over again this time around, which I think is testament to how wonderful this story is and how well written it is, because it's not necessarily every book that you like do you feel the same amount of love for the second time around, if that makes sense. I feel like there are kind of a select few books, at least for me, that you can kind of return back to time and time again and love just as much as you read them the first time around, but then there are other books that you enjoy, you like, maybe even love, but don't necessarily feel that pull to read over and over again. And I feel like this is one of those books that I could probably read over and over and over again 5, 10, 15 times and never get bored of it, because I think it is just such a vivid and well-written story that you just feel completely transported into Avonlea and into Anne's world from the very first page, and I absolutely love it. Another thing that I remember feeling back when I read this book for the first time, and I'm feeling all over again now, is just this overwhelming urge to embrace my inner Anne, by which I mean to take time to be more like Anne Shirley Cuthbert. And the thing that I think sort of sets Anne apart from other characters and from other people is two things that she has within her character. The first is her completely unparalleled ability to notice detail, to pick up every single detail and feature of the world around her and to like describe it with such incredible detail. And I feel like Anne just is a character unlike any other in the way that she just completely, I guess, like devours the world around her. She doesn't just exist in it, she completely like embraces every single thing that she comes across. So her ability to observe everything that happens is something that is very unique to Anne and kind of inspires me to notice more of what is going on around me in the world. And then the other thing that I think is very unique to Anne as a character and kind of complements her ability to notice everything is her ability to always look on the bright side and to find the joy in everything. And I think her ability to notice detail then allows her to find even more things to feel joy about. So I feel like Anne is a character who looks for positivity in every circumstance that she finds herself in, or she certainly tries to find the positivity in everything. But by noticing every tiny detail, there is just so many more things to express joy about. So she is a character that just bubbles over with joy and with excitement, probably because she notices so much, and so she feels more joy and more excitement than other people because she just notices more things to feel those emotions about. And so I feel so inspired to embrace my inner Anne just by noticing more and by expressing more joy. So whether that be, you know, the sunshine on a morning, like on a winter's day like I noticed this morning, and the glisten of frost on the roofs outside as the sun catches on like a cool winter morning, that's something that Anne would without a doubt come down to breakfast and tell Marilla about immediately, because she just notices and doesn't want to keep that notice to herself. She wants to express it and share it with everyone else. Or whether that's something smaller like the heat of a mug of coffee when you've just poured the boiling water into the cup and have picked it up and it's toasting up your hands before you take the first sip. I just feel like there are so many wonderful things that happen that would be considered, I guess, mundane or commonplace, just everyday things, that if we just took more time to notice those more everyday things that we kind of go through the motions with normally, we would find so many more things to be joyful about, because we do so many wonderful things, or I do so many wonderful things every single day. Little things that add up to your entire existence. And I think that is what makes Anne such a great character, because she reminds you that, yeah, big things happen, like big events happen that are noteworthy, but life is made up of a few big events, but lots and lots and lots of little events, and it's the little things that make up the majority of your existence. And so if you choose to only think about the big events, you're going to spend your life kind of chasing those highs, whereas if you allow yourself to find the joy and excitement in those small everyday things that you do without even thinking about them normally, you will inexplicably make your life so much more joyful, because you will be noticing things to be happy about in every single action that you take. And I feel like that is just a wonderful thing that cannot be overlooked. So I feel like Anne is just such a wonderful teacher and a character that brings me so much joy, because she reminds me to find the joy in everything. So I'm sorry if that sounds like cheesy and a little bit over the top, but I remember feeling this when I read Anne of Green Gables last summer, and I'm feeling it again now. So I hope this is maybe a little reminder to you, whatever you're doing right now, just to take a moment and just like pause, notice the room around you, notice something that brings you joy, and just allow yourself to like let that settle in and appreciate it, because I feel like it can go a long way to making you a happier person if you just allow yourself to find joy in everything around you. So there we go. I'm already loving this reread, and I'm only about 45 pages in. So I managed to read about 5 chapters on my lunch break, which was just over 40 pages, and I just loved every single one of them, because like I said, I think L.M. Montgomery has such an incredibly captivating writing style, because it's so vivid, and that means that you just get completely immersed in the story from the very first page. And I think the very first chapter of this book, which starts with a focus on Mrs. Rachel Lynde as a character, is one that encompasses so much of what makes this book so good, because it does such an incredible job of weaving a character in with the landscape they exist in. And I think that's what I enjoy so much about this book. So I'll read you the first paragraph. Mrs. Rachel Lynde lived just where the Avonlea main road dipped down into a little hollow, fringed with alders and ladies' eardrops and traversed by a brook that had its source way back in the woods of the old Cuthbert place. It was reputed to be an intricate headlong brook in its earlier course through those woods, with dark secrets of pool and cascade. But by the time it reached Lynde's Hollow, it was a quiet, well-conducted little stream, for not even a brook could run past Mrs. Rachel Lynde's door without due regard for decency and decorum. It probably was conscious that Mrs. Rachel was sitting at her window, keeping a sharp eye on everything that passed, from brooks to children up, and that if she noticed anything odd or out of place, she would never rest until she had ferreted out the whys and the wherefores thereof. First of all, I think Rachel is quite a relatable character to me, at least, because she is such a busybody and so nosy, and she cannot rest if there is a piece of information that she knows is out there and she doesn't know the detail of it, and that is so me. I find it so annoying if I know that there's like a secret or some information that other people know that I don't know, and I feel like I have to find it out. So I feel like I feel very much a kindred spirit with Rachel in that regard specifically, because I have to know what's going on at all times. But the thing that I like about that paragraph in particular, aside from the fact that it kind of highlights Rachel's character, and I definitely enjoy that, is the way that it interweaves this description of the landscape with the description of the character. And so we have this complete intermingling of the two, where you are simultaneously finding out about the world in which the characters exist in, but that world and the way that the natural landscape exists is a clear reflection of the characters that live upon that landscape, and I just think that is so cleverly and beautifully done. So you have this incredibly rich description of both landscape, natural, and kind of like human landscape as well, and we just have this intermingling of the two. And I think the way that it kind of expresses the way that people and their environment are, you know, undeniably connected is just so incredibly well done. And I don't know if that makes any sense. I hope it does, but I just feel like that first paragraph is a great example of the writing style and the narrative devices that make their way through this entire story. And I just think that Ellen Montgomery has a real talent for writing the natural landscape, but also for showing how that reflects the people within it, and I absolutely love that. So clearly I'm enjoying this reread quite a bit, and I could talk about Anne of Green Gables and this story for hours, it would seem, but for now I'm going back for a couple of hours of work. As I might have mentioned before, I finish an hour early on Fridays, so I'll be finishing work at 3 p.m, getting my weekend started with a long hot shower because I have quite a busy couple of days ahead, so I want to have my hair washed, ready to go and ready to start the weekend nice and clean. And then once I've done that, I'm probably going to light a candle, maybe do some baking. It kind of depends whether Jay's home from work yet, and if I do some baking, then I might do some reading. It's going to be a very calm, chilled out evening, but one thing that is for certain is that this book will be playing quite a large part of my evening, whatever I end up doing. is just something about the particular brand of classics that encompasses books like Anne of Green Gables and Little Women that has such a cozy, comforting, wholesome, down-to-earth vibe that the second I start reading them, I just get the uncontrollable urge to pull out a bowl and a wooden spoon and start baking something immediately. So that is exactly what I did last night, because I was just so inspired by the homesteady vibe of Anne of Green Gables that I just felt I had to bake something. And I tried to make something that was slightly festive, so I ended up with this chocolate orange bundt cake, which I just think was such a lovely decision to make, because chocolate orange is a flavour combination that I feel like is very festive, but also I had all of the ingredients in, which made it quite a convenient bake because I didn't have to go out and get anything. And when it comes to, of course, making vegan cakes, I find that the simpler the structure of the cake is, the more likely you are to find success. So a bundt cake is great because you don't have to stack any layers, and there is no sandwiching of cakes that are too heavy and then result in a cake that squishes the other one underneath it or anything like that. It's just one structure, and I could not be happier with how this one turned out. I just think it looked delightful and also was such a fun way to spend my Friday evening. And I have to say, we've had a decent slice. Myself and Jay have both tried it and we both are big fans, which is saying something, because whilst I don't dislike chocolate cake, it's never usually my first choice. I would always prefer either a coffee cake or a vanilla Victoria sponge kind of thing. I prefer those kind of cakes to chocolate cakes, but I think the zest of the orange kind of lifts it, and because it is a festive flavour combination, we both really liked it, despite not being usually the type of people to go for chocolate cake over any other sort of cake. So big fan of this one, and it was super simple to make. The ingredients were just vegan butter and caster sugar, then self-raising flour and cocoa powder, and a little bit of oat milk to bring it all together, and then the juice of an orange. That was literally all that was in the base of the cake, and then it just went in the oven for about half an hour until I could put a knife in and it would come out clean. So it was a really easy cake to make, and the frosting or the icing glaze thing was literally just icing sugar and the juice of an orange until it came to the correct consistency. Drizzle that on top, put the zest of the orange and some shavings of dark chocolate on top, and boom, that was my cake made. So very pleased with how this one turned out. Honestly ecstatic, because I haven't made a chocolate cake, I don't think, since being vegan. I've made brownies and things like that, but not an official chocolate cake. And I also just think there is something so festive about the bundt shape, maybe because it kind of looks like a wreath because it is obviously so round. But yeah, very pleased with this one, and I have to credit Anne of Green Gables for inspiring me to get my baking on, because I just feel like when I read those kinds of books, I immediately just want to move to the middle of nowhere, live in a little cottage and have a homesteady life where you live off the land, and it just makes me feel so cozy to think about it. So that was my Friday evening, but I did also manage to spend quite a bit of time with Anne and all of her companions, because I am now on page 220 of this book, and I think Anne of Green Gables has about 280 pages, yeah, pretty much 280, and then the second half is obviously Anne of Avonlea, so I only have a tiny little bit left of Anne of Green Gables. And it's so interesting reading this one now, having watched the entirety of Anne with an E as a series, because I'm seeing sort of snippets of Anne's character and storylines that came up much later on in the show, kind of be shown at an earlier point in the novel. So I'm really excited to see what Anne of Avonlea is like. But I just think that this is such a lovely, fun book where you can tell that it has its grounds in trying to, I guess, encourage children to have a strong moral standing, but it also just feels really fun and just very light-hearted, and you kind of know that you're in for a happy ending, even though it kind of takes you on a roller coaster to get there. Anne also had a quote in this book which I personally really liked, which was where she was talking about how she struggles to be good, which is a sort of running theme in her character, and she says, But when I'm up in school, it's all different and I care as much as ever. There's such a lot of different Annes in me. I sometimes think that's why I'm such a troublesome person. If I was just the one Anne, it would be so much more comfortable, but then it wouldn't be half so interesting. And I feel like I relate to that so much in the sense of having like a very multifaceted personality, and where if you could just pick one lane, maybe your life would be easier. But by enjoying so many different things, so for me, of course, there is reading, there is baking, there is running and swimming, there's yoga, and obviously my full-time job, and just so many different things that kind of take up your mind, and you almost feel as though you're putting on different hats for all of these different facets of your personality. And potentially maybe it's a little bit complicated to have like so many different plates spinning at one time, but I do think it makes life so much more fun, and I can't really imagine ever being someone who could just pick one interest and stick to it forever. I suppose I could be described as fickle because I change my mind about things and pick up new hobbies all of the time, but I just think it's so much more fun that way, to allow yourself to try out different things and enjoy different sort of hobbies and interests as you change as a person, and not to think that just because you were interested in something once, you have to stick to that forever because you decided once it was good and therefore you can never change your mind about it. So I felt like I really related to that quote about Anne, and how, yes, it might be simpler if you were a more simple person, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as interesting. So clearly still loving this book. It is so wonderful. Now, of course, it is Saturday. I'm not starting the day with my tea advent calendar because I need to leave the house almost immediately. My plans for today have changed rather dramatically because I was supposed to be getting the train up to Newcastle to meet my friend Katie. She lives in Scotland and obviously I live in York, so we decided to try and do a Christmas day together in Newcastle, which is right in the middle of the both of us on the train. But last night we both had emails that our trains had been cancelled. We were looking at alternatives, but then there is bad weather up in Scotland and there has been a lot of disruption in the rail service in general over the last few weeks. So unfortunately we decided to cancel because it just seemed like the odds were not in our favour for both of us being able to get there and get home later on today, and it just seemed a little bit too risky. So unfortunately that day has been cancelled, so instead me and Jay are going to drive over to Leeds to try and finish off all of our Christmas shopping. So we're going to leave immediately, go and do some shopping, and then when I get back I'll warm up with an afternoon cup of tea from my tea advent calendar, and of course a few more pages of Anne of Green Gables. Underestimate just how busy town is going to be when it is December and everyone is scrambling to get their Christmas shopping done, but had quite a successful day and I am so close to having all of my Christmas shopping done. I have presents for everyone at this point, which is the main thing, and now it's just a case of getting like a few extra little bits for a few people and like topping up the present pile, but I'm so close to being done, which is quite a relief, and I feel like I'm not doing too badly this year considering that it is only the 10th of December and I'm almost done. So now it's just going to be a case of wrapping, getting everything ready, and then boom, ready for Christmas. But on the way home from town we did drop into Jay's parents' house and I actually had an Amazon package waiting for me. For some reason, even though we haven't lived at that house for like 2 years now, some Amazon packages from my wish list specifically still get sent to Jay's parents' house even though I've updated my Amazon address. I don't really know why that happens, but there was a surprise package waiting for me, which I haven't obviously ordered anything to their house, so I'm assuming it is a wish list, and it certainly feels like a book, so I saved it and I thought we could open it together. So without further ado, so annoying when the paper tab doesn't work. You know what, let's just rip it open. Okay, there we go. Is there a note? Oh, so this is from Annette. Thank you so much, Annette, if you're watching. Merry Christmas to you as well. This is very greatly appreciated. And we have, oh my goodness, what a beautiful book. So this is one I actually very recently added to my wish list because I saw it in Waterstones, and it is an Agatha Christie copy of The Mysterious Affair at Styles, but it is like a new hardback classic edition, and I just can't get over how beautiful that is. Wow, what a bloody wonderful present. Thank you so much, Annette. I cannot wait to read this one because I have not read this Agatha Christie yet, but when I read a couple of her books earlier this year while I was in the mood for watching and reading some murder mysteries, I kind of like reinvigorated my desire to read her works, so this one is definitely high on the agenda, and I might sneak this into my December reading if I can find time. So there we go, surprise present for myself, and I've almost ticked off presents for everyone else. It is now, as you can probably tell from the window back there, quite dark outside. It's almost 5 p.m, so we really spent the whole day out of the house, but I'm now going to put some pizzas in the oven for dinner. I've got pizza and curly fries, which is my personal favourite meal probably ever. Watch some Seinfeld with dinner and then get on with some more reading of Anne of Green Gables. So it's now 7 p.m. exactly, and I think this is definitely by far the latest that I've opened my tea advent calendar, but I opened it up to treat myself after finishing reading Anne of Green Gables, and I was delighted with the flavour that I was given today. So of course today was door number 10, and we have ourselves a salted caramel Lebkuchen tea, which just sounds absolutely delicious. It is gingerbread dipped in salted caramel, and the ingredients are Sri Lankan black tea, ginger, apple pieces, cinnamon, rosehip, cardamom, cloves and orange peel. Absolutely delicious, and I think this one was in last year's tea, but I love having Lebkuchen at Christmas time. I just think it's such a lovely little like treat, and I absolutely adore it. So in a tea format, 10 out of 10, cannot critique it at all. And of course, given the flavour of this tea, there was only one mug that I could pull out for this one, and that was my München Starbucks mug that I picked up when we had our holiday in Munich a few years ago, and it still remains one of my favourite places that I've ever been to. I think it was just such a beautiful city, and this mug is all I have to commemorate it physically, but I absolutely love it because it just has, well, I love those Starbucks like you are here mugs, and I try to collect them wherever I can, but because of the pandemic I haven't actually been able to pick a new one up for quite a few years. I think the last one I picked up was in 2019, and that was the one I got in Paris, so I definitely need to pick up my collection of these mugs, but my Munich one is my favourite, probably because Munich is my favourite place that I've been. But without further ado, let us try our salted caramel Lebkuchen tea. It smells very like gingerbready and sweet, so I am very excited for this one. It kind of tastes like a gingerbread vanilla latte, obviously tea rather than coffee, but in terms of like the spice blend, it's like very gingery, but then there's like a strong vanilla-y sweetness, not necessarily in the sense of it being like a powerful vanilla flavour, but almost like the comforting sweetness that you get from like a marshmallow that tastes kind of like just mellow and sweet and vanilla-y. So I think this is a lovely tea. Definitely one that I would happily drink over and over and over again. I might add a little bit of sugar to this one because I think that would just elevate the flavours a tiny bit more, but it is really, really delightful. And I feel like so fitting that I should get a tea that I love so much today, given that I have just had the most spectacular day and have finished what I'm now deeming to be potentially, well, no, definitely one of my favourite books of all time, and that is Anne of Green Gables. I just think this story is so wonderful, and one that I just didn't want to end. I'm so glad that it is just the beginning of a book series rather than a singular novel, because it's so nice to know that I can pick up and continue the story with these characters. But the first book in the series just has so much magic and delight, and I just absolutely adore this story so much. It is almost devastating at times, and there are things that happen in the book that don't make their way onto the Anne with an E TV show, and I'm kind of glad that they don't, because the show, I think, captures all of the most positive parts of the story. And while I think that the I guess message of the book is an overwhelmingly positive one, there are some more like harrowing elements in the story, in the novel format at least, that don't necessarily sort of come across on screen. But I absolutely love this story. It's interesting that it's obviously only just shy of 300 pages long, and that entire sort of narrative, that 300 pages, is what takes 3 seasons to show in the TV show, whereas you get through it so quickly in the book that it does almost feel as though the aging of the characters, like Anne and her friends, who obviously start the story at around 11 years old and end when they're about 16, it feels as though that aging process is a little bit more rushed in the book, because it happens so rapidly over the course of just a few chapters in a novel, whereas in the series you obviously get to see them across 3 whole seasons, and the actors kind of like grow up in front of your eyes, so the aging process feels a bit more natural, and also just like feels like it takes a more reasonable amount of time, if that makes sense. But I do understand, obviously, with this being the first book in the series, that potentially Ellen Montgomery didn't know whether this would be a series that people would be interested in reading further, and so she wanted to kind of encompass a full and complete kind of character arc for Anne, in case this was the one and only Anne story that she got to tell, whereas obviously we now know that there were several more to follow, and we get to see even more of Anne's future, which I'm really excited to kind of dive into right now. But I kind of understand why it feels a little bit rushed, but also necessary to have kind of achieved a complete story in the first book. But absolutely loved it. It was incredible, and I'm so glad that I decided to give this one a reread, because it was such a wonderful experience, and having sort of struggled to get through and pick up sort of traction with the last couple of books I was trying to read, I feel like this book has just set me right back on track. It is of course getting late on Saturday evening now, and that is going to bring this Vlogmas video to an end, but I will be starting Anne of Avonlea as my next read, and I cannot wait to get into that one, so you'll hear about that in my next vlog. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in a couple of days for yet more festive fun.